Okay, as I've been introduced, my name is Tuuda Haitula, and my presentation is going to be on community empowerment and decolonial approaches to heritage practices in Namibia. And my case studies are going to be on projects that I've worked on as part of the Museums Association of Namibia, as well as the National Museum of Namibia. And I must give a disclaimer now that my examples or the case studies that are going to be used in this presentation are not necessarily linked to rock art, but looking more at a decolonial aspect and how we can use that in our in the work that we do. So for just a quick introduction, which I want to share so that you have a greater understanding and appreciation of the coming slides and just to fully conceptualize that. So the first thing that we are going to look at is restitution and decolonial practice. And there's a community agency as well as rethinking custodianship. However, these elements will not be individually explained here, but as I talk about the examples and the work that we've done, I hope you'll be able to then understand what I'm talking about. On the right side, yes, on the right side. So just to give a context of Namibia's history or what it is now has become called. There's history of when Namibia was colonized, that is through Germany and South Africa, and also the different aspects of cultural disruptions that the Finnish missionaries did in Namibia with the introduction of Christianity. So I'm just sharing that for context. And also as a colonizer, and this is more on the side of the Bantu people with their arrival into Southern Africa, and the affected communities, which is the Kung, the Haikom, the Junkwasi, as well as the Naro. And this is part of the groups that have been widely discussed during this conference. We're going to call them the Sun people or the Bushmen. However, for this presentation, I've used the names of the communities in Namibia. And on your left side, you do have a QR code. You can scan it. It will take you to an exhibition and a booklet that was done by these communities. We can come back to the QR code once I'm done, because if you go there now, you might lose focus. Now, when it comes to material culture that is inside and outside Namibia, I'm just going to share this also as part of the wider introduction before we get into the case study itself and the type of work that we did. So we're going to look at the main material culture and their movements. Number one is what stayed. These are the material culture or the objects or the artifacts that stayed in Namibia and are still actively being used. Or if they are no longer being used, they cease to exist naturally. And then number two, we have what left. And then number three, we have what was taken. By what left, I'm referring to the cultural belongings that were deliberately given to the colonizers or the entities that were responsible for administering the country at the time, such as the Obakonyama Power Stone, which was given to the Finnish missionaries because of the disruption within the kingdom for safekeeping. And then at the independence of Namibia in 1990, such a power stone was returned. And then, of course, the last item that we have what was taken, and this majority of the items that are no longer in Namibia and the effect that it has. The images we have there is some of the cultural belongings or material culture that is at the social history section of the Iziko Museums of South Africa, and also talk more about that in terms of restitution and how we are doing that in terms of restoring the culture of Namibia. And then the main challenge that we have, and I'll talk more into this challenges from the work that we did. The first thing that we noticed was we call it a language genocide, because with the removal of some of the material culture means the communities were no longer able to practice or do some of the activities that they wanted to do because that specific item is no longer there. And with the absence of that, then the knowledge was also not transmitted to the younger generation, because one way of keeping the culture and heritage alive is by, and stop and smile and then take, yeah, please. Okay. Okay, I think we can, all right, we can continue now. So what we are saying about knowledge is because some of these items have been away from Namibia for more than 200 years. And when you try to repatriate them or the practices of restitution back to Namibia, we are now faced with there's a generational gap also, where people that used the specific material culture no longer exist. And then the ones that want to use it now also don't know where to go for that information. And it also makes it then difficult for us to carry out our provenance research. And then it's also similar with family practices that are disrupted. There's some material culture that are uniquely known or used by certain family members. And with their removal from that society or from those family members, they are no longer able to carry out with that, as well as the rituals are fading away. And that is mainly with the Finnish missionaries, with the introduction of Christianity. A lot of rituals and spiritual aspects or material culture was removed, and we are no longer able to continue with that. And of course, the last point there is the loss of access to physical objects. And right now they are in storages in museums. As you can see the picture on the third picture at the bottom, this is how the storage facilities are looking like where the Namibian material culture is kept and people don't have access to it in Namibia. And then I'm going to briefly talk about some of the major restitution projects that we worked on. The first one is Action for Restitution to Africa. This was started by the late Dr. Jeremy Sylvester. And the main idea there was to sort of map all of the Namibian material culture or objects that are outside Namibia. And so far on that database, we have about 30,000 objects, and majority of them are also here in South Africa, especially under the Iziko museums. And during that process, when we're busy with the Action for Restitution to Africa, the colleagues from German-speaking countries also reached out to us. And we also like to believe it's because of the Macron speech, and everybody wanted to do something in the space of restitution. So they started working on their own database, and German-speaking countries came together, they developed their database, and there is about 19,000 objects from German-speaking countries. However, this database is not accessible to the public. There was, I guess, willingness, or they wanted to put it out in the public, and we cautioned them that it's not wise to do so because some of these objects of the material culture have traces of blood, hair, and these things are sensitive. And we did not want members of the public to go look at this database, and the first thing you see is aspects of human remains that are readily available online. So this database does exist. Researchers have access to it, or if anyone has a specific interest, they can have a look at it. We are still in the process of trying to identify potential. We are trying to work with the culture officers in the different regions and see if we can set up establishments in each region or platforms where identified community members can come and have a look at the objects and say, okay, this one is fine, can be accessed by the public. However, the more sensitive ones then should be removed from this website. And it's also something that was mentioned here during the week, that not everything should be put out there for the public's consumption. There are some secrets that we should keep to ourselves. The example of Finland, they also have quite a lot because of, as I said earlier on, the introduction of missionaries. It interrupted the practices, the spiritual practices in Namibia. And in the image that you have there is the Minister of Culture at the time of Finland, together with our Minister, Mayor Anangi Pondoka, who was our Minister of Education, Arts and Culture, receiving a Manyaro Shilongo. The direct translation would be Power Stone, but the word Power Stone doesn't give it that meaning. It was in Finland also, was taken during the arrival of the Finnish missionaries, and then it was returned in 2023. And with that example, when the president visited of Finland, and based on the research that was done prior to that, they wanted to return the Power Stone. And what we then did, because we knew where it was coming from, so the provenance was quite clear, we spoke to the Ondonga Traditional Authority, which is the custodian of this power stone. And then we worked with them from the beginning to the end in terms of restitution, where is it going to end up, and also what was their input. And one of the important thing that came out of this was they wanted the power stone to be at the National Museum up until the time where their kingdom, or they want to construct a shrine up till to a time where that is ready, and they can get it from the National Museum. So I'm just sharing that to say in terms of restitution and the work that we've done, each case is handled differently, because if we can identify the provenance or we know where something is coming from, then we can easily engage with them compared to the thousands of items that are just in museums and we don't necessarily know where they're coming from. And that also informs our decision when it comes to restitution and what we want to repatriate. In terms of South Africa, we're currently in talks with the Iziko Museums of South Africa to repatriate some of the cultural belongings back to Namibia. However, of most recent project that we are working on is the exhumation of 2 Namibians that were part of the Robben Island prison and they died here. They're buried. One is at Guguletu Cemetery, the other one is at Maitland in Cape Town. And this is something that we want to do by August 26, which is the Namibian Heroes Day. Okay, and here I'm just going to talk a bit about some of the challenges at the National Museum of Namibia, because as per the Act of the National Heritage Council, the National Museum is tasked or is mandated to receive all of the repatriated items. And remember the 30,000 figure that I gave, as well as the 20,000, all of that are supposed to come to the National Museum. And then from that, you can then see if there is enough provenance, and it goes to the Ondonga Kingdom or the Kavango region, depending on that. However, the National Museum has its challenges as well. This is a pre-colonial building, which did not have the capacity to receive all of these items that are going to be repatriated. So space is number one. We have capacity issues, human resources, infrastructure, and then disturbances. So when you do your presentation late at night. Okay, I think that one is an error. Please disregard the last point there. But it's just to talk about the different challenges that we are facing at the National Museum of Namibia. And that is also linked to this, because right now there's a lot of institutions that are also coming out, contacting the Museums Association of Namibia to say we have these items from Namibia, we'd like to bring them back. But then the National Museum of Namibia does not have the capacity. And we are also not just accepting everything that is being given to us. We need to understand its context, its provenance, and also see if we do have the necessary space. And then there is a specific project that I want to talk about, which was the Confronting Colonial Pasts, Envisioning Creative Futures. It's a project that we started in 2017 in partnership with Museums Association of Namibia, National Museum of Namibia, University of Namibia, as well as the National Arts Gallery of Namibia. And it was funded by the Gerda Henkel Foundation. So with this project, we saw the repatriation of 23 cultural belongings to Namibia. And for that to happen in 2017, a team was established, and then they went to Germany, the Berlin Ethnographic Museum, to look at the Namibian collection, from which then they decided which objects are coming back home. There was a criteria set out. For example, how rare is this object? Is it still being used in our society? And also, what state or condition is it in? Can it travel safely to Namibia and still serve a certain purpose? Now, also as part of that criteria, we then chose the 23 that came. And then when they came to Namibia, in fact, even before they arrived, we had trainings. The first training was for fashion designers. We took them to a conference, and then we displayed some of the objects. The image you are seeing there is one of them, and it was for them to get inspiration as fashion designers about their cultural belongings, especially items that are no longer found within our society. And the results after that were really astonishing. We saw handbags, dresses, with inspiration coming from the objects that they were seeing. So that is one thing that we did in terms of restitution and giving community members a chance to either express or have a look at the cultural belongings and see how they can use that. And then we also had workshops in terms of the capacitating the sector for museum professionals and curators. And then we also had scholarships for MA students as well as postgraduate diploma. And then through that project as well, we facilitated the launch and the curation of the Museum of Namibian Fashion. It's in Namibia. And then we also have a documentary. And the documentary is just documenting the processes that we took. Because from 2017 up to June 2025, we've been getting a lot of questions because it was such a big project. A lot of things were done during that project. And we then decided that let's use some of the funds that were available to come up with a documentary so that people can watch it and understand what we did. In addition to that, there is also a publication that a lot of people can read from. There is a QR code on the screen again. If you scan it, it will take you to the website where you can read more about this project. And as I conclude, the project was also nominated for Sustainable Development Practices in Museums by the International Community of Museums, and the awards were last month. We did not win, but ICOM was kind enough. They gave us something for just being nominated as a finalist, and then have a list there of the winner as well as the other finalists. I hope you were able to follow and everything, and yeah, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Before I give the mic, I just had one quick question. Do you have examples of how all this project of restitution helped community members to reconnect with their knowledge?
Okay, yes, I can share an example, but I want all of you to scan the QR code and go on the website. There's more information on that. But what we did with provenance research, we went out into the communities and for them to tell us what were some of these artifacts used for. And from that, there's been a lot of research done, a lot of people recreated, and they appreciated that the cultural belongings have returned to their communities. And yes, just for them to have access to them, there was a lot of appreciation. And I think also the scholarships as well. Yeah, and also the last project, the ARC project, it's now artists that recreated some of the artifacts or drew inspiration and then come up with something else. Because we just presented it to them and then said, what do you want to do with this? Or how do you appreciate it? And then they developed multiple things. Yeah, thank you.
I want to challenge you a bit. It has become fashionable by African countries to speak of the need to decolonize. And I always ask myself, what is decolonization? And I want to give an example of a coffee, rough as it is. You boil water, you put your coffee, you pour sugar if you want, and milk if you desire. Now, my understanding of decolonization, using that as an example, will say I will be able to extract coffee out of that water, extract sugar, and if I had milk, extract milk, and I'll be left with water. But we know that is not practical. So then I ask myself, in terms of humanity, can we close our eyes and go back to a period, let's say, using Jan van Riebeeck as an example, before 1652 in South Africa. And then we say, this is who we were. This is how we lived. When we decolonize, we are going back to that. It's not possible, right? I want to hear your opinion on that. Because everyone is talking about decolonization. And looking at Nick, we were talking about even language, use. We've got people who keep saying, African people, brown like me, who keep saying, hey, we must show pride in our languages and so on. Yet they can't even speak their own languages. They speak English to each other when they are both Zulu speakers, not because one is Pedi, another one is Zulu. Lastly, while I still have the mic, specifically on your presentation, I find it difficult to understand, and I take it as a fashionable thing to do at the moment. Everyone, restitution. Whether some of these materials were stolen or they were purchased properly, we demand them back. But here's the challenge. Earlier this week, we had a paper, I can't remember who was the presenter, but we were talking about museum visitation by Africans. They only go with school groups and they are never back in that museum again. And my question therefore is, noting that the museum is not an African concept, why do we take all of these materials that are being repatriated back? You take them from one museum to another museum. Why are we putting them in the same museums? You say you are decolonizing, but you are taking it to the same building that is colonial in nature, even though it is within an African country. So are we doing it to just make ourselves happy and feel that, yeah, we are showing them these colonial managers that we want what they stole from us? Is it a feel-good factor, or is something more significant? Thank you.
Okay, on your last question on the issue of museums, it's something that we've been discussing also, and I'm happy that you said museums are not an African concept. And in our discussions, what we've realized is a lot of knowledge transmission used to happen at the fire. When you sit with your father, your grandparents, and that's how knowledge is passed on. Unfortunately, now, we don't have those spaces anymore. And when we do have them, not everyone has access to them. And what we are trying to do then with museums, visitor numbers are low. It's not an African concept. That one is clear. When we repatriate these items, we want to give them a central place where there is information, and redefining the museum to be a place of knowledge where people come and learn. And if these items are repatriated, we do provenance research, we showcase what they are used for, let people at least have that information. And one thing we are saying also, the items were not meant to last forever. I think it was mentioned here during the week as well. But these ones, they died a premature death. They were taken away. But what we are fighting for is let things be in society, let them disappear after they've completed their life cycle. And now we are bringing them back, not to be permanently in the museum, but as the place of arrival. If we do our research and we understand that, okay, this something came that came from the global family, then we can return it to you as the rightful owner. And then on the decolonial part, I think context matters, and also what you are trying to decolonize and what does it mean to you as an individual. I love the example of the coffee. What I can share regarding this project, we have a publication. It's not yet out. And when we reached out to the publishing houses, they asked us they showed us their criteria, and then we responded. And then most of them said, we cannot have opinion pieces through our publishing house. And then we said it's fine. Because what that meant is they were saying the information that the grandmothers are saying needs to be peer reviewed, needs to be verified. But if my grandmother is telling me that this is a fertility doll, sometimes you might find literature, sometimes you don't. So in this aspect, when we say we are decolonizing, we are putting our grandmothers' voices in a book that we are going to print. Maybe not through publishing houses, but we just want to have that information out there, and not only the usual writers that are appearing in the books, but the voices of Namibians. So that is the one aspect that I can mention as an example in terms of decolonizing repatriated and restituted material. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just a few quick comments. I sort of agree with you that, and even to some extent in Globe, that we are, and this is what students should note, we are way beyond post-colonial theory. We are into other theories, global theory, other theories. Colonialism has long gone, though its impacts are still here. So out there are a lot of theories that we can use as heritage practitioners to deal with those things. But I guess my substantial question is to, now that you talk about scanners, and obviously there are copyright issues, intellectual copyright issues with this kind of information, where people can scan anytime, anywhere, and what do you benefit out of that if they're not actually going to visit these sites, etc. Maybe awareness, I don't know. But my question has to do with artificial intelligence, and I think it's not for you, but it's for everybody here. Artificial intelligence is here to stay. At UB, and other universities, they're officially saying it's a necessary animal. Students are using it for all kinds of things. People, it even asks you, are you going to Cosmo workshop? Do you want me to design a cover page or PowerPoint for you, buddy? How do you want it? It does those, and most of the things are wrong. But my point is, it's there to stay. So how can we incorporate and use artificial intelligence wisely in this our endeavor to deal with communities? The reason why I'm saying so is because in other places like Oxford, they even have an artificial intelligence guy within the department. They develop tools and they educate these artificial intelligence robots to do analysis for them, different areas. So I guess that's the one to deal with. And then the last one is also has to do with still on post-colonial, the use of media, especially the radio. In Botswana, we have news that are being read in different indigenous languages. And unfortunately for me, it's a national radio, which is not relevant. Maybe if we can now start to say, for me, it's like, I think they should do community radio stations and leave our national time alone. They should have Kalanga, all this. And then people, maybe, what's your view on that, the use of community radio stations? Community radio to educate people about sites, other things.
Okay, no, thank you very much. On the use of the radio, we did the same with this project as well when we went out into the communities. And the way that the Namibia Broadcasting Corporation is set up, we have, it's not I won't say a community radio, but it's a radio in all the national languages. So for example, Wambo, there's Oshiwambo, NBC Oshiwambo. Then you have NBC Rukwangali, which is, Rukwangali is then listened dominantly in the Kavango regions. Then you have Silozi in Katima Mulilo. And how we used it then is for information. For example, I speak on Oshiwambo and Rukwangali. I was at those stations to share the knowledge, and then it's how we do our community outreach. So I think in terms of radio, it's serving its purpose in Namibia. And with the last census of 2011, that I haven't seen the statistics for 2023 in terms of radio, but they said 90% of Namibians still listen to the radio as a mode of communication. Yeah, and thank you for your comments on AI. I think it's here. It's not going anywhere. We need to adapt and use it.
Okay, let us take a last question because we are running out of time, and then we will move to the next presenter.
Thank you very much. I just need a perspective from a Namibian side of, in terms of repatriation and restitution. If this was initiated by the museum, or did you also have help from government? Because with us, for example, Sarah Batman, it was an act of parliament, France, that we got her to be repatriated. Then also another issue that I'm interested in finding out in terms of how you're dealing with in terms of issues of provenance and ownership. Because like in South African museums, we have a lot of objects that we have inherited, and sometimes you have captions like Obdirab Rak opgevind. and or in die gat gevind or something like that in Afrikaans, and you're trying to figure out where is it coming from. But also for me, what's concerning, especially with human remains, because there are so many issues, I think we still need to also open issues of local or internal restitution or repatriation. And museums are not actively speaking about that, because we do have objects in museum collections that need to be taken to local communities. As much as we are engaging with overseas museums, but what are we doing internally? And also from a Namibian perspective, have you started those dialogues? What's really happening? Thank you.
All right, thank you. On the first question, I think you'll be surprised if I mention that currently in Namibia, we do not have a policy on restitution. So all of the restitution work that we've done has been on a case to case. And somehow it has worked out well. We engage the specific museum or the institution, and we sign an MOU, and that's how we facilitate it. On the provenance research, we have the same challenges. And remember in my first slide, I mentioned that we went through the Finnish missionaries, the German government, then of course the South African apartheid government. We have the same challenges. You find an item, if you are lucky to be written South West Africa. Sometimes it's just Ovambo. Now that is a huge area, and it's the challenges that we face when it comes to provenance research, because it says Ovambo, but there's about 13 different ethnic groups within the Awambo communities. Which one are you going to look at? And that is why, even with these 23 objects, the main question we get was, why these 23 and how did you select them? And sometimes it's based also on provenance, because you don't want to take all of them. Now they are in the National Museum, like Dr. Ndlovu said, from a museum to another museum. So we try to see which ones have a bit of information, and then also allow the community members to appreciate that. Because if we can give an example of, we return something, it's from this family, and it went there, then the community also appreciate the work that we are doing. So that is how we are doing it. In terms of internal restitution, we haven't gotten there yet. And one of the things that we are realizing is that a lot of people don't know what was taken. They don't even know if anything was taken. It's only those who are fortunate to be in spaces like this. Or you go to Germany, they invite you to the storage, you see all of those shelves and they are saying it's things from Namibia and you had no idea. Now, that is someone who's privileged to be in that space. The average Namibian, not so much. And that is how we use the radio now in terms of this 23 that came back and how they could have assisted us in terms of provenance research. So I think it's still a long process. A lot of work still needs to be done in terms of outreach and just to create that awareness. And just if I can conclude and go back to the 19,000 that are on an online platform that is not open to the public, that we want people to see what is there, but then also we don't want to offend people because these are sensitive material. If we can clean up this database and then say, okay, we set up a computer at each culture officer in the region, people can come and view. I think it's the only way we can create more awareness. And of course, with the use of the radio, because in Namibia, the radio works quite effectively. Thank you.